In an operation that marks a significant escalation of US pressure on Venezuela, US forces seized a large oil tanker off Venezuela's coast on December 10, 2025. The vessel, identified as the skipper, was intercepted and taken over in a dramatic at-sea action involving helicopters and special operations forces. The seizure was confirmed by President Donald J. Trump, who announced the mission from the White House and was supported by the US Coast Guard, US Navy, FBI, and other federal agencies. This unfolding story reflects rising geopolitical strain between Washington and Caracas, fueled in part by long-standing US sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports and a growing American military presence in the Caribbean Sea, the most robust in decades. According to multiple US sources, the seizure began in the early hours of the morning, with special forces deployed from helicopters that approached the tanker as it sailed offshore. US Coast Guard maritime security and response teams fast-roped onto the deck alongside marine units and special operations personnel in a coordinated boarding manoeuvre. The operation was staged from the USS Gerald R, the US Navy's largest aircraft carrier, currently operating in the region as part of a broader US military build-up. Helicopters were launched from the carrier, delivering teams swiftly onto the vessel. There were no reported casualties, and crew members on the tanker did not visibly resist the boarding. FBI Director Kash Patel later posted on social media confirming that a warrant had been executed to seize the tanker, citing its involvement in transporting oil in violation of US sanctions and its alleged connections to networks linked with foreign terrorist organizations. He framed the action as part of a broader effort to disrupt illicit oil trafficking and funding streams for terrorism. At the White House, President Trump described the operation as unprecedented in scale, telling reporters, "We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, a large tanker, very large, largest one ever seized, actually." He did not provide specific details regarding the legal basis during the press event, but stressed the importance of the action. When asked about the oil aboard, Trump added with characteristic bluntness, "Well, we keep it, I guess." These public comments reflect an assertive US posture toward Venezuela, though they have raised questions domestically about legal authorities and international norms governing such seizures. The tanker skipper had previously been sanctioned by the US Department of the Treasury for allegedly transporting Venezuelan and Iranian oil, reportedly including shipments that may have benefited sanctioned entities and foreign terrorist groups. The vessel also drew scrutiny for transmitting deceptive tracking data, a tactic often used to conceal its movements. US officials assert that the tanker was transporting oil in defiance of existing sanctions, part of what they describe as an illegal network of oil transfers that undermines US foreign policy and national security interests. The FBI and Homeland Security officials highlighted this rationale in statements accompanying the release of video footage of the raid. The seizure is part of a wider campaign known in US military circles as Operation Southern Spear, a sustained effort targeting narcotics trafficking and smuggling networks in the region, which over recent months has included airstrikes on suspected drug smuggling vessels and increased naval deployments. In Caracas, the Venezuelan government condemned the seizure as illegitimate and a breach of international law. Officials characterized the operation as an act of international piracy and an attack on Venezuelan sovereignty. Caracas has pledged to appeal to international bodies and has denounced the US action as an attempt to seize control of Venezuela's natural resources. President Nicolas Maduro, who remains the sitting president of Venezuela, has decried the operation as part of a broader US strategy to destabilize his government and force political change. Caracas also maintains that Venezuela's oil exports are legitimate and that its economy has been crippled by external interference. Additionally, the government of Guyana announced that the seized tanker had been falsely flying its flag at the time of the interception, calling the unauthorised use of its maritime flag a serious issue and underscoring the complex jurisdictional dimension of maritime law enforcement. Analysts say this unprecedented seizure signals a significant shift in US policy toward Venezuela, reflecting a willingness to use force outside traditional arenas of counter-narcotics operations. It comes amid increasingly assertive US military activities in the Caribbean, including aerial patrols and interdicting vessels alleged to be smuggling illegal drugs. The skipper's seizure also resonates in global oil markets, with crude prices reacting to the news as traders recalibrated risks associated with Venezuelan oil flows. Some shipping firms reportedly may now avoid Venezuelan cargoes altogether, raising the possibility of slowed exports. In Washington, the move has drawn both support and criticism. Supporters argue it demonstrates resolve in enforcing US sanctions and curbing illicit networks, while critics question its legality and warn it could entangle the United States further in foreign conflicts. Debate continues among lawmakers and legal scholars over the authority claimed by the administration for such operations. As of December 11th, US forces retain control of the tanker, and the legal process to adjudicate ownership of the vessel and its cargo is anticipated to unfold in US courts. Venezuelan officials have vowed to continue diplomatic challenges, including possible appeals to international tribunals. The broader confrontation underscores deep divisions in US-Venezuela relations, rooted in geopolitical competition, economic sanctions, and conflicting visions for governance and resource control in the Western Hemisphere. Observers suggest the tanker's seizure may be a harbinger of further confrontations unless diplomatic channels mitigate escalating tensions. In the days ahead, the seizure of the skipper is likely to reverberate far beyond the stretch of coastline where US forces boarded the vessel. It introduces a new and unpredictable element into an already volatile standoff, one shaped by sanctions, competing claims of legitimacy, and the steady militarization of the Caribbean. For Washington, officials argue the operation underscores a renewed commitment to enforcing sanctions and disrupting illicit networks that span continents. For Caracas, it represents yet another intrusion on its sovereignty and a reminder of the profound economic and political pressures weighing on the country. Regional leaders, shipping companies, and global energy markets will now be watching closely to see whether this becomes a singular enforcement action or the beginning of a broader pattern of maritime seizures. And as President Trump signals that more operations may follow, diplomatic channels face the growing challenge of preventing a tense situation from hardening into a deeper confrontation. What remains certain is that the skipper incident has reopened old questions about power, law, and influence in the Western Hemisphere. And it has done so at a moment when every move, every statement, and every deployment carries consequences far beyond the horizon.